Welcome to the Rowdy Wrestling Podcast with Tony Stabile and Steve Rockamaniac.
There's a rowdy crowd today.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Rowdy Wrestling Podcast, breaking news edition. Not something we do all that often, but the biggest news in the world of pro wrestling certainly deserves this. No, it's not the return of Goldberg, which we might touch on a little bit later. No, TNA, much like your creepy uncle's divorce, is slow in death and keeps going as they've received an injection of money from the Fight Network here in Canada, more specifically Anthem Sports and Entertainment Corporation. The parent company of Fight Network has dropped some money into TNA and made a press release here. I'm going to read it very quickly, and when I'm done, Steve, I want you to give me your reaction as well as other news that you do have. As here at the Rowdy Wrestling Podcast, and specifically Steve, we got inside knowledge, y'all. So I'm going to go right into it very quickly. Anthem Sports and Entertainment Corp regarding their recent infusion into TNA. The statement reads as follows. Anthem Sports and Entertainment Corp, the parent company of the Fight Network, today confirmed that it recently made a working capital loan to fund the operations of TNA Impact Wrestling. Fight Network is a licensee of TNA programming for broadcasts in the US, Canada, and other international markets, and it's also the exclusive licensee of TNA for streaming internet-delivered TV. Fight Network has offered to provide TNA Impact Wrestling with fundings to repay the loans made by Mr. Billy Corgan and is positioned to provide additional transitional assistance to the company. Let's remember that, guys. TNA is a strong property of the Fight Network and is a licensee and global distribution partner. We have keen interest in seeing the company not only survive, but continue to grow and thrive along our own growth, said Leonard Asper, CEO of Anthem. We are hopeful that the company can soon get back to doing what it does best, which is produce great wrestling content. Steve, it's still alive.
Hey now, everybody. It's still alive. TNA, has been on the brink of death the past, actually more than a year now, as has now been well documented as this past couple weeks, dating back to actually just before Bound for Glory, there was a lot of talk about what's going to happen to TNA. Obviously, Billy Corgan was very vocal and public in regards to the possibility of Bound for Glory being canceled. I remember back at Slammiversary that the production trucks almost didn't show up because they didn't want to pay them. And now, as this really crazy story has played out over the last couple of weeks, we have seen that there's a lot more to the TNA, money woes than anyone had imagined. And this has really been coming out over the past definitely week and a half, 2 weeks. All the details from, who had possibly saved TNA once again started to come out. But at the same time, all the legal problems started to come out. As last week, Billy Corgan filed suit against TNA as he, of course, being one of the owners of the company right now, he was seemingly being kept in the dark with the status of the company. And he, I think decided that, hey, enough is enough. Dixie, you and your shady stuff. We got to shut this down. And at that point, with court documents having been, made public and being submitted, and we started to see slowly but surely all the debts that TNA currently has, as not only were they owing, the Harris Brothers company money, they were owing a production company, AO1, money for work that they did on last year's Bound for Glory. This dates back a year. They owe the state of Tennessee tax money. They owe the Navarre Corporation, which is an old DVD corporation, money for distribution. They owe a lot of things, and debts were totaling over $4.5 million. And so then it came out last week that a certain MCC Acquisition Corporation had decided to send TNA amount of money 2 days or 3 days before Bound for Glory.
Like really last second at this point.
Yes, exactly. And so at that point, they were able to continue and go on with Bound for Glory and go on with the tapings, and they also were able to, basically film enough for the rest of the year and allow these, sale negotiations to go on. Now, Dixie had initiated contact with the WWE and started to negotiate to sell the tape library to the WWE. And, the working idea was there that they would get enough money to, probably pay off almost all of their debts. And then they could sell the company, change the name, and, continue on with their operations. And then it came out that, they owed Fight Network money. It also came out that they were basically giving part of the tape library to the Fight Network. Now, it's at that point, WWE decided to say, screw off, we're backing off. And so I decided to, now, first of all, I before I get into this, I want to also give a shout out and credit because, in the wrestling world, in the wrestling news world, you don't always give credit to the sources. But there is a guy online, David Bixenspan, on Twitter, at David Bix, who has been breaking all the news the past week in regards to the legal paperwork, in regards to all the money issues that he's
been on the ball.
He's been on the ball. He deserves the props that, he's doing better than anybody can even think of when it comes to reporting. But when he tipped off the fact that MCC Acquisition Corp is based and registered at the same address as some of the Fight Network's offices, that I started to look into this. Now, I do know, and I do have some sources within the Fight Network that I decided to get into contact with a couple weeks ago when this news started to come out, and so they couldn't go on the record to name themselves as the source, so I couldn't, and they didn't want me really to put this out there at the time in regards to the fact that Fight Network was indeed in advanced negotiations to get involved with TNA to keep them afloat. And at the time, they were like, okay, well, listen, we got to keep this on the down low. But they were able to divulge to me that Fight Network was planning on getting into business with TNA beyond the fact of being their TV broadcaster in Canada, and wanted to, keep this company afloat. And it looked at the time that a deal was going to be made. And then, a lot of the other news started to come out about all the money that TNA was owing. And, it looked like, well, maybe, TNA won't survive this just because of the massive amount of money that they owe to many different creditors right now. And, basically at the time, he's like, we know who's buying it, but I can't tell you. And that basically was tipping me off at that Fight Network was going to get involved in the TNA business. And tonight, a couple hours before this press release was put out, my source at Fight Network contacted me to tip me off and tell me, listen, Fight Network is owning TNA. And the interesting part of this whole conversation is that not only were they about to make it public that they helped fund the latest round of tapings, but also they are offering to continue helping pay off the debts that they currently have. Basically, they want to take a large majority stake of this company into their hands. Now, there's a lot of questions going on right now, and it hasn't been made entirely clear in regards to the status of Dixie Carter right now, and as far as going forward is concerned, because basically what has been happening is that everyone backstage wants to get rid of her. And when I say that, it's like they're all sick and tired of the way she's running the business. And, even at Bound for Glory, she worked all the boys and tried to say there's nothing wrong, everything's good. But then all this news started to come out about how bad of a situation it is right now. And they all want Billy Corgan to take control. And, Billy Corgan then, of course, put in this lawsuit, and, and it was supposed to go to court tomorrow. And now this news comes out. And I'm going to read the exact message, or at least one of the exact messages that I got from my source earlier. and says, Fight Network now owns TNA. Actually, I should say it's a funding operation in partnership with Billy Corgan. Okay, so now some people. Yeah, go ahead.
But that's it. That's what I was going to ask a little bit, because you mentioned, some people are wondering, where does Corgan fit into this? And the press release that Anthem, the parent company of TNA, put out there, that they're paying off the personal loan that he made. Now, up until the very last loan, every time Corgan had put money into the company, his return was stake into the company. Now, are they considering everything they put into the company, he's losing his stake at this point, or they're just returning the original loan and whatever stake he has still remains? That's where I'm not sure when I'm reading this.
Well, see, in the court documents, Dixie Carter personally owes Billy Corgan money. Okay, she owes him money, and it went beyond the ownership stakes that Billy Corgan had gone into it. They had deals. Obviously, we've seen Dixie Carter has pulled all sorts of deals, anything she can to keep this company afloat throughout the past 12 months. That includes owing major debt to people for the amount of that so many years now, where they don't pay the bill, then they try to restructure, then they restructure. When they don't pay the restructured bill, they then restructure it again, and they've done whatever they can to keep afloat. And meanwhile, Billy Corgan has been working desperately to try to keep this company high and alive, so much so that he's put it in his own money. But a lot of people want Billy Corgan to finally get a hold of this company and actually start running it. And the thing that's been holding Dixie Carter there is that it's her dumb pride. And this has come out a lot the last couple of weeks in regards to the fact that she's looking for an exit strategy that's going to not make her look bad. That's why she went after WWE, because she was going to be able to say, you know what, I ran a wrestling company. Ultimately, we were sold to the WWE, as opposed to her having to look bad and saying it went bankrupt. And this is just a question of pride. She does not want to look bad. She does not want to make it look like she failed at the business. So she does anything and everything she can to make sure that she stays alive. She, is quite dull when it comes to the wrestling business. Vince Russo put out a story a couple of weeks ago and talked about a night where Dixie Carter, okay, and this is in 2011, okay. This is how many years after this company has started now? It was 9 years into it, I
Pretty
think.
much.
So she had a meeting with Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff one night. This is after they've already started there. And so they're having this discussion, and Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan start to talk about a certain subject. And then they realize that they don't want to tell Dixie Carter all the details of that. So, Hogan kind of says to Bischoff, kayfabe, brother, kayfabe. And so they kind of slow down on the details that they were telling her. And they continue on with the conversation, not divulging too much information. And a couple hours, she gets out of the meeting and she calls a TNA agent, a well-known TNA agent, who was sitting at the table with Mr. Russo and a few others, and asks them, what does kayfabe mean?
Yeah, that story. Oh my God.
Yeah, okay.
I've completely forgotten.
Yeah. So she asks what kayfabe means, and they're like, are you serious? And then she goes on this rant. How dare they kayfabe me, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. She's dull when it comes to the professional wrestling. Meanwhile, Billy Corgan's passionate about this, and he wants to run this company. And at least according to the sources that I have right now, Fight Network wants to be in partnership with Billy Corgan. And I think it's becoming pretty clear that Dixie Carter is not the person to run this company. And it appears that Fight Network has realized this, in the sense that if they're going to be, running this company, they want Billy Corgan in their partnership. And at least my sources are telling me right now that this funding operation is in partnership with Billy Corgan. So this could be the beginning of the end of Dixie Carter. Now, the way you read the press release, it basically makes an offer in the press release to say we are willing to provide additional funding for transitionals and this and that and the other thing, and to make sure that this, the company stays afloat because we want them on our network and so on and so forth. So basically, they're making an offer for the company in this press release by saying, we're going to, fund the additional money that we need to pay off the debts to transition the company. What does that basically mean? It's like, hey, we're going to help take over this company and pay the funds. And that's why they specifically mentioned Billy Corgan, because Billy Corgan's lawsuit has become extremely public. Everyone knows about it. It's something that was supposed to go to court tomorrow morning. Okay. Now, a few hours ago, sometime this afternoon, it's at that point that they announced, like, okay, we're going to push this back a week. And that was an interesting situation because it's like, oh, why? Why did they? Because they had temporary restraining orders put in. They didn't want anything happening with the company. They wanted to freeze the contracts to make sure no one is able to quit because they didn't get paid. They wanted to, Billy knew that this is getting bad. I didn't even know how bad it was, and everything's going to fall apart. So I need, I'm an owner and I'm not aware of this stuff. We need to freeze everything. So he put in restraining orders, and then earlier today, they decide, okay, we'll push this back a week, probably because they knew that this announcement was about to come out and maybe a deal had been made. And so a couple hours before this press release comes out, I get contacted. They tell me, okay, that's it. The Fight Network is going to get into the ownership stake, and it's a funding operation with Billy Corgan. So interesting that this could be the solution that TNA needs to stay alive, at least for the next little while, at least for maybe a longer term period here. We're not looking at dying in the next few weeks or in January when it's time to film again, because they are supposed to film in the early January, their next set of tapings. And so the thought was that if they don't get this deal done by then, it would be over at that point. But Fight Network, their company and Anthem Sports, it kind of branches out in a wide array of networks, and there's money there, and they're ready to get in the game. They want to make sure that TNA stays alive, and they're seemingly willing to put the money in. And as a guy, who used to be a huge fan of TNA, and has soured a little bit on the company over the past few years, amongst the reasons is the way the business was running. Because, as we saw, it was affecting the talent. It was affecting the talent that stayed in this company. Look how much talent, and it's funny, I've seen the memes the last week or so of like this one talent meeting where Dixie Carter says, you're either with us or you're against us. And then they had shots of all the talent: AJ Styles, Eric Young, Bobby Roode, Samoa Joe. And you see them all in that meeting. And then right beside the photo, you see, all of them and their success that they're having in WWE right now. And there's no doubt that some of the poor business decisions that have been made over the years have cost them these people. They would have never lost AJ Styles at the beginning if they didn't try to cut his pay. They would not have.
Here's the story. Let's play devil's advocate, and let's say not every one of them would have left, because there's probably some guys who would have grown stagnant. The true artist types that wanted a different challenge. But you're right. There is a vast majority of guys that have left there strictly because money.
Yeah, absolutely. And the talent, the roster has suffered because of it. The product suffered because of it. That's not to put down the current product. They've done some decent stuff recently, but they've lost so much of their audience that no one was able to, no one was coming back to them because no one cared. They were already gone. They were already not watching anymore. Therefore, they're not making any more extra revenue. They're not selling much merch. And, the company was just going downhill, and they were losing people left and right. James Storm was like, screw it, I'm leaving. He comes back, and then he's like, screw it, I'm leaving again. It's just, that is what the major problem was the last few years. And let's hope that if this does come through and everything settles down, that we now get to see TNA try to grow again. when you look at WWE nowadays, apart from the Goldberg thing, okay, because Goldberg bumped some ratings this week, that's for sure. But TNA, getting their 350,000, 400,000 fans, when you look at WWE the last couple of months, even Raw and SmackDown have been getting down to 2 million viewers. To get on the same page or same level, it's not far away when you consider that, hey, it's just they've been there before, but their product has suffered because of it. And now it's been made, public and very dirty that their company is just horrible in terms of financing, in terms of how this company is run. And if I'm Anthem Sports and I'm the Fight Network, I don't want to get in business with Dixie Carter.
No.
And that's why when I was told by my source that this partnership is with Billy Corgan, despite what this press release says, and where it leaves somewhat open for interpretation as to, are they trying to push Corgan out, or are they trying to be with Dixie Carter, or are they trying to be with Billy Corgan? I find it extremely hard to believe that Anthem Sports would try to push Billy Corgan out and then get into a financial agreement with someone who can't run a company. It's been made clear that she can't run a wrestling company. She might be able to run other companies, okay? But she used to run.
I don't know. Do your homework on her.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to comment on her, what she may or may not be able to do. She had a PR company at one point. Did that run well or not well? I'm not sure. I don't know what the financials was on that. Okay, but it's made clear that running TNA is not her thing, and so I think the Fight Network's got to be smarter than that, because knowing sources within the Fight Network, and knowing that at times they've gone through certain restructurations on certain branches of their company, I find it hard to believe that they would sink this much money into TNA blindly to Dixie Carter. Okay? Because that will be a huge mistake, and I think they're smarter than that. So the fact that this could be a quote-unquote funding operation with partnership with Billy Corgan, according to my source, I am ecstatic at the fact that this may finally be settled, and that we can move on from talking about, how they're going to, they can't afford to even run their show each and every week, where they're having to pull off audio at the last second because their show won't be able to air on TV because the person who wrote the music threatened to sue them, and therefore, if you play my music, I'm suing you. And so at the last second last week,
hours, not even, yeah.
Pop TV was like, we're not going to air the show, and they're like, okay, no, pump in some crowd music and play it, because there was a lawsuit that was going to be taken. It's like that. It is severe. It's severe levels at that point.
Now, here's my question. Purely speculation, 100%. Right. Mm-hmm. Now, if a Canadian company like Fight Network gets involved, mm-hmm. and let's just say they go deep in bed with Billy Corgan, mm-hmm. let's keep this PG, mm-hmm. Does that open the door for more Canadian involvement of TNA? Because right now you mentioned they've reserved, TNA as a company has reserved dates for filming at Orlando studios. Would it behoove them to move those tapings closer to Toronto in that case?
They would probably have to, do a study on the costs. Because
if I'm a Canadian company,
mm-hmm.
I see it being cheaper just moving it to a smaller venue. Not in Montreal. Whoa, that'll never happen. But in Ontario, because if you can take a page out of NXT's book, and I know people are gonna bitch and moan. I'm gonna have Terry yelling at me through Twitter at this point. NXT, they're the kings of making a 200-seat arena, not even an arena, like an amphitheater, look like a 5,000-seat place on television. I mean, what's to stop you to at least get $200 worth of worth of money live? Because at Orlando, they're not paying to be there. These are people who walk in and sit down for a wrestling show. They're ushered in and ushered out, and it's free with admission of the studios, of the park. So wouldn't it behoove them to move it to a place, even of a smaller, tiny arena, as long as you film it right? It can look bigger.
Well, the product would have to...
How big was the Asylum?
Well, it was probably a bit bigger, actually, I think, than the small studio that they use. But the product would have to get better before you could actually charge people to come in. But, well, no, it's true.
No, I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
But Anthem does have studios in New York, LA, and Vegas. Okay, they own studios in those three cities. Even though they're headquartered in Toronto, they own studios. Now, how big of the studio that is, I'm not exactly sure at this point.
Give me the old NWA wrestling. 50 people, one side.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But, if these studios are big enough to actually hold a wrestling show, then, yeah, it would be pretty smart for them to move it to that. But, they would have to do, obviously an investigation at that point, look at the costs. How much does it cost to rent Orlando? Is it worth that we stay there as opposed to going somewhere else? I mean, as we saw, the last few years where they tried to take TV elsewhere.
No, but they tried to take TV elsewhere, but never at a fixed place. Their idea was they were going to tour it, and they tried these bigger arenas. They tried their luck at filling an actual place. That's where your problem is, in my mind. If you're able to set up a home base where you have the same TV crew working it every time, not like TNA where they would run out of money and then not pay that TV crew and then reserve a different TV crew to help you out. You know what I mean? A production company. Like, that's the issue. Fight Network is a production company. So you're already probably being able to work a lot of that stuff in-house. TNA wasn't a production company, which blew my mind. After being in business for 10 years, why don't you have your own personal staff? Why don't you have your own personal equipment in that case? I mean, listen, I'm not going to throw any independent companies here in Montreal under the bus, but there's an independent company here that evaluated the cost of renting the equipment every show and decided, hey, let's scale back on the production for a couple of shows, save money, and then buy the equipment once and for all and it be ours. At the end of that, hey, your production value goes up, the cost goes down because you own all of it. TNA is a company that's been around since 2002, 14 years, and they're still hiring independent, outside production companies to film their show.
But it seemingly was like a work to not pay. Because if you look into
no, because look, and I hate to compare it to WWE, and I hate to compare it to Sinclair, for ROH, but I'll throw it to ROH rather than WWE here. ROH had a lot of trouble, and the money situation was always really bad. Finally, they got bought by Sinclair, which is which is a cable network. They own their equipment. They're not renting it every time they show up. They tour. They don't film in the same location all the time. Is ROH a billion-dollar company? No. Is it a company that's making a lot of money? Probably not. Is it making enough money that Sinclair isn't writing it off? Yes. Is it a defunct company? No. Was it going bankrupt? To my knowledge, it wasn't. And that's because they went out of their way and they tried to cut their costs by investing properly in it. Now, this is where we do throw Dixie Carter back under the bus at this point. And why the fuck wasn't that something that was going on beforehand? Why is there why does there need to be an influx of money every time they need to film? I understand you have to pay your crew, but if the crew isn't either employees or contractually obligated that this is a permanent reoccurring gig, that's where you have an issue.
Yeah, I mean, Dixie Carter ultimately just asked for credit from 15 different people and just started one after the other. It's like, oh, okay, well, we can't afford this anymore. Hey, we're gonna hire this company to do our production.
Fucked wrestling. That's what it is. A different panda has fucked wrestling.
Well, yeah. Well, okay, hold on. Listen, in defense of Panda Energy, even though I hate WWF,
she's
Canada,
a byproduct of it.
Okay, in defense of Panda Energy, they realize hey, listen, we can't justify to our shareholders and stuff that we continue to lose tons of cash for this anymore. So you're on your own. We're not dealing with this anymore. So then she then started okay, we need to borrow money here and borrow money there. And as we saw with the AO1 lawsuit, it's like, okay, they hire their company to do production for, Bound for Glory and for the TV tapings after that. Okay. That's started what has been a year now of living on credit, and not only living on credit, but defaulting on this credit. Because it was made clear in the lawsuit with AO1 right now, which is still active, that, not only did they not respect the dates that they were supposed to start paying back, but they dicked them around too. They're like, oh, stick with us. Oh, that's weird. We didn't send the money. Oh, okay. Well, let us look into that. Oh, and then we didn't wire the money. Okay, no, but we'll UPS it for you, cash in an envelope. It's like, what? And then they then continued oh, come on, stick with us. We're going to switch to another network that's going to have so many other viewers, and that'll bring more revenue. So just don't leave us. And it's like, this is money owed for now a year. This is not only owed to them, they owe money to they owe money to the Tennessee to the government for taxes. Did they pay the taxes? No. They're like, oh, we owe taxes. Yeah, we can't pay that right now, and we can't pay this, and there's talent that hasn't gotten paid because they just borrow money. And it's been a year now, at least a year, maybe a bit more, because we've seen other, debts that have been listed that date back even farther than this. But mostly it's been 1 year now that they've been living on credit and just find anything they could do. So it started back then. Then they found other creditors. They, Ron and Don Harris. They found Billy Corgan. Now they have the Fight Network, and they were able to, and eventually get to this point. But it became public, and basically they ran out of racetrack heading into Bound for Glory, where it's like, okay, there's no other people that want to give us money. What are we going to do? And so that started the fight. That started the arguments. They defaulted on money that they owed to Billy Corgan. So he's like, what the hell, man?
Big mistake.
And then he's like, well, I thought I was supposed to be an owner of this place. Why are you saying you're like? And then they pull the deal with Fight Network, and may or may not have told Billy about it. And and then all the debts start pouring out. Like, they owe money here, they owe money there. He's like, well, what the fuck is going on? Look, the company's about to go bankrupt, and I'm not aware of it. I'm going to file a lawsuit, and and you're keeping all these stupid shady deals, and and not telling me about it. So Billy Corgan hopefully gets his shot now to take this company towards what he envisions as something that will be viable for the wrestling fans, and something that hopefully is able to bounce back in terms of business, not only in terms of products. Some of the products not that bad right now. Some other parts of it is bad, but the ultimate problem, as we alluded to a few minutes ago, is that the business is the problem right now, and they need to clean that part up. And hopefully this is the beginning of that the Fight Network getting involved in this. And that's probably why WWE decided to back off when it looked as though they were going to purchase the tapes. They sent out their surveys about possibly having TNA content on the network, charging a premium for it. And it looked as though it was like the deal was almost done. They would have bought the the tapes for like a few $1 million. That would have paid off the majority of the debt that TNA had. Billy would have paid the rest. Dixie could have left at that point, and Billy would have had it. And if Fight Network wanted to get involved and keep it alive in terms of the programming under the new brand name, then everything would have been fine and dandy, and we would have moved on. But it came all pouring down at that point, because it's like, oh, you gave part of the fight. You gave part of the TV library to the Fight Network. Okay, we're not buying shit from you. Go fuck yourself. So that's where it started to fall apart again. So now Fight Network's stepping up. It's cool. It's interesting. Let's see how this plays out. I'm gonna try to get some more information from them over the next little while, the next few days, to see if I can get some more information out of the Fight Network side. Stay tuned on Twitter. We'll keep you updated on out at Rowdy Wrestling or at Rockamaniac00. As we're not always involved in the breaking news game. It's
but
not
this certainly merited it.
Yeah, it certainly merited it, and also, since we did have an inside source on this, and I know there's people that say inside sources, but they're just full of shit.
No, we got firsthand on this.
I have firsthand knowledge of this from an inside source at the Fight Network. Okay, I was at the Liberty Buildings not too long ago in Toronto. I know that there's a bit more information coming my way than some people may think. So it's just to say that this is a legit story coming out right now, and it's good to see that we might be on our way to a resolution to keep TNA alive. Because hey, the more wrestling, the better. As we see that the wrestling industry is kind of on the down low right now. It's on that down curve, since this is a cyclical business that has seen its better days, but. More places for people to learn their craft, the better. I mean, that's obviously always been said, regardless of the criticism that you have of the booking. I mean, we have that on both sides of the on WWE and TNA, and so hopefully
Coke wouldn't taste as good without Pepsi, is what we're saying here.
Exactly.
So we'll leave it at that. We got a lot of news. We just blew into that. You mentioned it, Steve. Guys, keep it locked to our Twitter and the website. So Twitter at Rowdy Wrestling, at Rockamaniac00, at Forte Stabile, rowdywrestling.net. We're going to leave it at this. Guys, we're going to be back on Monday with, Monday night with our review of WWE Hell in a Cell. We'll likely have even more news regarding this. If anything else huge happens, naturally, we're going to drop a little bit more news here on the iTunes stream. Other than that, thank you to everybody. Thank you, Steve.
Always my pleasure, Tony.
And guys, keep it locked, and thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Rowdy Wrestling Podcast. Download again next week for more awesome pro wrestling talk only on rowdywrestling.net.